Hi, I'm Anneliese Lindsay, and for my senior project, I made a photography portfolio. In 7th grade, I moved to Aveson, which was the first time that I had ever switched schools. There are a lot of changes in my life within that year of moving schools, and one of those changes was an interest in photography. Photography was something that I always found really beautiful, but never thought of myself doing. Yet the second I picked up my first camera, I couldn't put it back down. I wanted to take pictures of anything and everything I could. So, taking all that I've learned over the past 8 years of studying photography, I decided to put it all together into a portfolio of my best photos. At the beginning of the year, Mr. Tom had us do an assignment on Thrively. It was a strengths assessment. We were asked different questions, and at the end, it gave a summary of our top 5 strengths. I got social, compassion, creative skill, assertiveness, and flexibility. Thrively said, and I quote, "You absolutely thrive as a social being and love to be around others. Most would describe you as being fun to be with, outgoing, and very approachable. You shine in social situations and people look to you to be the social cruise director." I don't completely disagree with what Thrively said, but I'm going to give you my personal thoughts on it. Personally, I think Thrively was right about a decent amount. I am social and compassionate, and I do have a lot of creative skills, but I think a lot of the social being and loving to be around others doesn't attain to me as much as it used to when I was younger. I think deep down I will always be a very socially compassionate, assertive, and flexible person when it comes to other people, but as society has changed and as I've grown up, I realize that I've become much more okay with being by myself than being around other people. I think Thrively might have made me sound a bit more outgoing than I actually am. At the beginning of the year, Tom had us make a digital vision board and write a future me letter. We were supposed to write our letter about as if we were writing to ourselves in the future and we were reading it on graduation day. That was kind of nerve-wracking to me. If I'm going to be honest, I wasn't 100% positive I would be graduating this year. School was always my biggest struggle growing up, and graduation was always my biggest fear. The letter was giving me so many doubts, I thought it was going to be impossible to write it and I would never finish it. Eventually, I did finish it, and it made me feel a lot better knowing that there was a higher chance of everything going as planned if I just buckled down and got the work done. The other assignment was the digital vision board, which I thought was really fun. We put together a document that described us and our interests in photos. I have some of those photos displayed on the screen above. The first one is of my dog, and I put this one in because I think it really represented my love for not only my animals, but animals in general. The second photo I have is of a plane in the sky. I put this one because I love traveling. I grew up traveling with my family, and it was one of our favorite ways to spend family vacations. To me, traveling by plane is the most exciting because I find it so fun to really view the world from such a high perspective. The third one I have is a photo of the camp I go to in the mountains every summer and winter. I decided to do a photo of it during the winter because winter is my favorite weather, and I think it really represents me as a whole, and mountains to me are what feels most like home. The last photo I have is of musical instruments because growing up I always played music, whether it was by myself or with my family, and music was always a big part of my life growing up. One of the next things that we did in class was we created a high school resume, which was a slideshow that we put together that connected all of our different years of high school. It showed all of the struggles that we went through, the things we learned, and anything else we thought was necessary. This was my high school resume. Starting off at the beginning, we have freshman year. If you would have asked me what I thought of high school while I was a freshman, I probably would have told you that it was boring, a waste of time, and didn't really feel like the effort. I probably would have said that I didn't like school, classes weren't fun, and teachers didn't really make it any better. Though, looking back on it now, I would have to say that freshman year was my absolute favorite year of high school. Although I wasn't the best at school because I was paying much more attention to my social life, I was probably the happiest I've ever been. I'm glad to say that I was able to focus on myself and really learn who I was as a person during that year, but I do wish that I had tried a bit harder in school during that time because I think it would have really helped me for future years to come. Because of my lack of schoolwork getting done, my GPA was probably the worst it ever was freshman year. I didn't really put that much thought into school while I was a freshman. I didn't have classes that I loved or any teachers I really liked, so school kind of felt like an extra add-on. I kept pushing aside my focus on school to pay attention to other things, and it was definitely one of the years I had to learn from the most when it came to academics. During this year was also when I finally came to the conclusion I wouldn't be playing sports anymore due to a previous injury I sustained in middle school. It was then I started looking into my musical side and started putting more effort into guitar, piano, and singing lessons. Music in that time felt like an escape to me. It was something that I could put my emotion into and use as a way to drown out the world around me. Growing up playing sports, it was really hard not having that anymore, so having music to fall back on when my previous activities were put on hold was very nice. Sophomore year was probably the dullest year of high school for me. I was focused a lot on academics and was actually starting to like school and some of my classes more. It was probably the calmest year because I wasn't a freshman, so I wasn't scared of being new, but I also wasn't at a stage in high school where college was quite a worry. I felt comfortable in myself and where I was going in the next couple of years, so sophomore year was probably the last calm year of high school that I had had, and I kind of miss it. Because I was focused so much more on my academics that year, I definitely did a lot better in school. Not only did I like it more, but I was also just trying harder. I realized how much more my grades were affecting my GPA and my future, and that I needed to get on top of them. Sophomore year was probably the best for coming to terms with getting on top of my work and also doing better at getting work done at home, not just at school. During sophomore year, I also found a love for poetry, not just reading it, but also writing it. In English, I would use poetry for a lot of my extensions. I would try to take the writing pieces that we had just worked on and turn them into poetry. I would try to get the reader to hear what I had been writing about, but in a different format. Junior year was definitely a roller coaster. There were a lot of ups and downs, not just with my own personal life, but with school in general. A lot of times it would feel like one moment I was on top of my work and then everything was going the way I wanted it to, and then the next moment it would feel like I was overwhelmed and I wasn't going to finish the class on time. Although this was really difficult and hard for me to work through, there was a lot of learning that came out of that year that I'm very grateful for now. During my junior year, I really learned to start loving a lot of my classes, and one of those classes in particular was English. I realized how much I used the writing in English as an outlet for what was going on in my personal life. A lot of times it felt like English class was a good escape and I could just focus on my work in the calm and quiet environment. Junior year was probably when I was doing the best in my classes. Not only was I trying harder, but I also really liked what I was learning. I really enjoyed doing the work in class and I got better at working outside of school too. It's always been hard for me to continuously do work throughout the week because I'm a big procrastinator. So there was a lot of pushing myself to get work done the second I got the assignment, which I think helped a lot for having to do work at home the next senior year. Talking about my senior year, as everyone can guess, it was very different from what I expected. I'm going to be honest, probably about 3 months into quarantine, I was pretty sure at least the first half of my senior year was going to be spent online. Little did I know it would be my entire senior year. At first I wasn't too excited about it, I'm sure most seniors weren't, but as the year went on, I realized how much spending this time at home by myself really taught me and prepared me for what college is going to be like. I used to be the type of student that couldn't get work done unless I was in a classroom, and it was really hard for me to focus when I was by myself. So having this time to learn how to sit down at my desk and finish the paper or the math assignment that I had due that night made me feel a lot better about college and life to come. I'm now going to be getting into the purpose of my senior project. The intent of my senior project is to show the audience a photography portfolio that represents the beginning of my journey in photography to where I am now. I hope to show the beauty that I've captured along the many years of my life, which leads me to my driving question, how to show the world's beauty among chaos. I thought that this driving question really represented not only life as a whole, but this year specifically. So many people have so many chaotic things going around at every moment that a lot of times people forget to just stop and really take in whatever the world is looking like that day. And so I hope that my senior project can really show that for other people. One of the projects that we did for our senior project was a letter of intent. This was an assignment that we were supposed to write about what got us interested in the topic that we chose. He wanted us to write about where our idea originated from or where it stemmed from and everything that got us into where we are now. So I'm going to tell you where my idea came from. Starting at the ripe age of 4, my parents put me into piano lessons, and I hated them. The teacher was rude and would never let me pick the songs I'd learn. They were all classical pieces. I never really thought music, or any art form, would be exciting. I loved sports, all kinds too. I played volleyball, basketball, and many, many more. My dream was to become a professional until about 6th grade when I started getting stabbing pains in my knees. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but it would eventually put a stop to my athletic career. It was during this time I decided to take another dive into the art world. I took up music again, starting with piano and guitar. This time, it wasn't so bad. I actually enjoyed it. Even though my music side was starting to come out, my knees got worse, and I had to quit my last sport in 7th grade. During this was also when I found my love for taking photos. My anxiety had started to show up during this time, so I would take a lot of walks during sunset to calm my mind. Living in the mountains, it's very easy to grab a camera, hike up a hill, and see the whole city. While taking photos, I saw how much beauty there was if you got the photo just right, and then realized that I had found a new hobby. One of the other assignments that we did for the senior project was a research paper. The research paper had to be relevant to our topic, so I decided to do mine on why photography is useful in this day and age. Photography is an art form much like others. It helps people calm their mind when they're stressing, and it can help you see the world from a much more beautiful point of view. Photographs are the universal language of our era. Everyone has hundreds, maybe thousands in their pockets. Images don't warp or age, and photography can be a way for some to sort out all the chaos going on around them. One of the best reasons that photography is important is because it allows us to express ourselves. It is a great outlet for what you feel or what you believe. Photographers see the beautiful in small things that most people just ignore and walk by. We like to stop and really take in everything we're looking at because we know that we're lucky to see it. Photography has no boundaries, and you can express yourself without any restrictions or any fear. For the senior project, we had to pick a mentor to interview. I personally found that this was going to be very easy because the first person that came to my mind was the one person who taught me how to use the camera and taught me everything I know on photography. The first time I ever got a camera was in 5th grade, and this woman, Kat, who goes to my church and is friends with my parents, sat at my house for 2 hours teaching me and my sister everything she possibly could about a Canon camera. Her interest had formed from her father, who was into photography, and they were both very introverted people, so photography a lot of the time was their way of reacting to the world and talking to the world. Her herself didn't really even have a mentor growing up. A lot of the time, the way that she got things done was wanting to prove it to herself and prove to people who said that she couldn't do it. Her friend, who now ends up being her husband, was the one person to tell her that if you say you're a photographer, people will believe it, and one day you will too, which I thought was a very cool way to go by life. As you know, I decided to do a portfolio of my photography from where it started to where it is now. I chose to do this because I figured it really fit into the whole senior high school's coming to an end, my childhood's coming to an end, and I thought it would be kind of cool to see where it all started to where it's gotten to now. I think taking this time to really look over my senior year and what's led me to the person I am today has been a really cool experience in this class. Going back and looking at all these photos and really trying to decide which ones I thought showed my best work was definitely a struggle, but made me a lot prouder of how far I've come, not just with my photos, but with me as a person. It really helped me show that I feel like I know what I'm doing when holding a camera, and the product I make is something that people will actually enjoy. So with that, I present to you my senior project, starting off with the first time I ever used a camera. When I was in 5th grade, my parents bought me and my sister a camera for Christmas. We were planning on taking a trip to Africa that summer with our family to go on safari for a couple weeks. About a month before we left for our trip, my parents had their friend Kat come over and teach me and my sister how to properly use a camera. The second I took the camera out of the box, I thought it was the prettiest thing I'd ever seen. Kat spent about 2 hours with us going over as much as she possibly could, teaching us all about the camera. While in Africa, I probably took photos of every single thing that I saw. I have a feeling now that it drove my parents a little bit crazy having to go back and delete all those photos later on. This was one of the first ones that I picked. I chose this one because I remember the moment I took this photo, I was so proud of myself. I thought this is one that people would show in a magazine or a postcard, and I remember showing it to all my cousins that were there with us and my entire family, and just being so happy of this amazing product that I produced that I felt like it just needed to be added into this. The next one I have is a sunset picture that I took on the trip. While living in the mountains, sunsets were always one of my favorite things to watch, but being out there with such a flat plain and so much wildlife that I never thought I would actually see in person, it was probably one of the most magical things that could have happened for a 5th grader. I just thought that this photo was so beautiful and really shows everybody who sees it what sunsets are really like in Africa, because they are probably one of my favorite things that I got to watch while being there. The next 3 photos I have are from a camp I go to up in the mountains near Big Bear. This camp is one that I grew up going to my entire life and is a place that I now call home. I picked these photos because so much of my photography has taken place at this camp, and although it was really hard to pick which ones to put into the portfolio, I chose the winter scene because snow is my favorite weather, and so I thought it really represented me and who I am and how this camp has changed me so much throughout my life. This is the second picture I have from the 3 from camp. I chose this one because I loved how it worked in the cabin more detailed and along with the trees. I loved the icicles along the rim, and I just thought the whole photo was really pretty and really gave the winter camp vibe experience. This is the last photo from the winter scene, and I chose this one because I thought this one looked the most like a winter wonderland. The way the snow sits so perfectly on top of the tree branches and how puffy it looks on the ground. I thought that this one was so pretty, along with the light coming straight through the trees. It couldn't have been left out of the portfolio. In March of 2017, my parents and I drove to the poppy fields, and while we were walking along, I saw a little airplane fly over us and decided to take a photo of it against the big blue sky and the white clouds. My mom's dad is a pilot and builds planes just like these, and whenever he would come to visit, he would always take me up and fly me over our house and all of Pasadena. It's one of my favorite memories of the 2 of us, and so seeing this plane reminded me of him, and I thought it was a great photo to add. Every spring in my front yard, we have these really long, pretty Matilla-high poppies that grow. Some people know them as the fried egg flower. I chose to put this one because the second I came inside to show my mom the photo, she fell absolutely in love with it, and anytime I would show anybody my photos, this was the one that she always would comment on. So I figured, for her honor, I would put it into this because it was one of her favorites. In 2019, my family and I went to visit the flower fields in Carlsbad. One of my favorite ways to take photos of nature is to get as much detail as I can of whatever the object is. When I was sitting in the flower field, I put my camera down into the flowers as a big gust of wind appeared and snapped a photo. I happened to catch the perfect time of the flower flying mid-air while the lighting was hitting it, and this was one of my favorite photos from the entire flower field. In summer of 2019, my sister and I attended the Khalid concert, who is one of our favorite artists. We got floor seats, which is the first time we'd ever been that close to the stage, and it was probably the coolest experience I'd ever been to. He had amazing lights and videos that would go on in the background during his performances, so I decided to pull out my phone and snapped a couple photos of the people in front of me, and this was my favorite one that came out of it. And it might have been my favorite photo from the entire summer. The next 4 photos I have are from nature during quarantine. I live in the mountains, so during quarantine there wasn't much else I could take photos of except for the animals and nature in my backyard. One of the animals that showed up the most during quarantine was this little blue jay that I named Bill. He started showing up around May of 2020 and hasn't stopped coming since. He comes and taps on the window if we forget to leave his nuts outside and has become a very close member of our family. This happened to be my favorite photo I took of him because he fluffed out all of his feathers right as I snapped it, and he looked so adorable to me. In September of 2021, I took this out the window of my guest room. I was trying to get a view of LA City in the background behind the branch, but my camera wouldn't seem to focus on anything but the branch. Later on, I looked at this photo and ended up really liking it because it kind of reminded me of many scenes from A Bug's Life, which was one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid. The next 2 photos were taken during this past April of a little hummingbird outside my front porch. I chose to put these in because I really thought it showed the beauty of the color and the little details that most people don't notice when just sitting outside in their garden. I decided to add this one as well because even though it doesn't show the color of the hummingbird as well as the other one does, I thought this one was really cute because it kind of looked like he was trying to give the flower a hug. The point of my presentation was to show you the world's beauty among chaos. I wanted you to see the change of my photography over my lifetime. I hoped that my photography will still continue to grow and expand and will continue to show people the beauty that they sometimes forget to stop and look at. Thank you.